catalyst and advisor with Growth Africa, and I'll be co-facilitating with my colleague, Dr. Abby. So Dr. Abby, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Abna Engman, but everybody calls me Abby. And I'm the Dean of Students and Community Affairs at Academic City University College. And I'm also a facilitator at Design Thinking Ghana. I also run a startup with Eugene that we call Stradmed Innovations, where we are looking at how to apply design thinking to develop medical devices. So happy to be here.
All right, great. So we will start with a teaser video, and I'm going to quickly share that. So enjoy.
Thank you, Eugene.
Thank you, Eugene.
And we will come back to that video during our presentation. And as Eugene is preparing to share the slides, I'll permit that I put off my video just to be sure I have stable internet connection. And our title for today is Leading Change by Design. And I believe that all of us, when we see something that is designed nicely, we all prefer that one to something that is not designed nicely. We all like what we call, quote unquote, designer goods. So as we will see from this presentation, change is a constant, but we just don't want to have change that is ordinary, but we want to design that change to make it beautiful and easier to get everybody on board to be able to get through to that change or to make that change. That by the end of this session, we want to be able to share with you and for you to understand what are some of the design thinking tools that we have available that we can use as team leaders, as team members to lead and manage change. We are all aware of the various tools that design thinking has, but we normally use them for innovation. But today we want to explore how we can use them to manage and lead change as well. We also want to emphasize the human element, to recognize that every change that happens actually revolves around people's journeys. And sometimes we see change as a destructive force, but there are so many opportunities how we can embrace that change. And as we are embracing that change, one thing that we need to keep in mind is that you need to take a systems perspective, recognize that there are different stakeholders, there are different connections in the system that you need to take into consideration as we lead people to that change, or as we make that change within our organizations, or as we go through our lives journeys. So the question we have before we start is that, can you spot a change? Wherever you find yourself as you go through life, are you able to spot a change? And I believe you've heard it many times, that change is the only constant in life. No matter what we do, we'll always encounter change. The other thing that I want us to take note of, change can be abrupt. We woke up one day in 2020, we said there was COVID, there's lockdown, there was no warning. Or change can be slow over time, like the climate change. Climate change has been happening slowly over time, but we are now facing the consequences of it. So change is always present, whether abrupt or it happens slow over time, change is always present. And usually when change happens, we say, oh, it's their trouble. Referring to COVID again, when COVID started in China, we say, oh, China is very far away from us. It is their trouble. It is not an African trouble or a Ghanaian trouble. It is their trouble. Then we had to face the lockdown, and all of a sudden it became my trouble, our trouble. What do we do? How do we get out of COVID? How do we navigate this thing called COVID? But like I said from the beginning, when we see that change, when we see their trouble, our trouble, what are the opportunities that we can find? Now, the most important thing that we want you to take away from today is design thinking is not just for innovation. The tools that we have in design thinking are not just for innovation, but they can be used to manage change as well. Some of the design thinking tools, if not all of them, can be used for different purposes. So back to the video that Eugene showed in the beginning, it was about a shoe. And if you watch carefully, you realize that the shoe could be changed so many times for different purposes, depending on where you are going or what occasion you are attending. So that's why we showed the video to tell you that design thinking tools can be used anywhere at any time. It depends on where you are standing. And the slide that Eugene is showing right now shows some of the changes that have happened recently in the world. And one of the things, I won't talk about all of them because of time, but one day we woke up and we said there's ChatGPT, and it has affected our educational system. So now as a lecturer, you ask yourself, did my student write this, or he got ChatGPT to write it for them? And recently I heard somebody took something that he wrote through ChatGPT, and then there was a tool, like I turned it into, and he told him that 80% of what you have written was done by AI. So as the change happened, students using ChatGPT to write their assignments and stuff like that, somebody has come up with a tool like Turnitin to make sure to check how much of this was done by a robot. Recently, we heard of robotic wives. That is also a change that is coming. Using the next slide, please. My introduction was just basically to let you know change is happening all the time. And if you are going to manage change, you need to take a systems perspective. Don't think just about yourself. Think about the people around you, where you find yourself, what is the culture, what are the values that they believe in, how are all these stakeholders interconnected, where are you getting your feedback from? Like you see from the double diamond, when we are using the double diamond and we are going to innovate, there's always a feedback loop. We do research to find out what are people thinking, what are they saying, but where are you taking your information from? Is it just about the boardroom, or you are taking information also from the grapevine, and how are these interrelated? So there's a book written by Kotler, and the title of the book is Our Iceberg is Melting. And it's basically a story about penguins who had to decide to make a change. Instead of reading the whole book, we have a short video to show on what actually happened within that story. And Eugene will play it, and I implore you to pay attention.
Hi everyone, today we are talking about nuggets for building a trustworthy leadership, using the lessons from a book I have chosen. So this book starts by talking about penguins who are living in their own colony on an iceberg in Antarctica. And they've been living there for their whole life. So it's the home of their fathers, their forefathers, and will always be like that, except that one penguin called Fred. A very curious, level-headed, and creative penguin, as the book described him, is noticing that there are large cracks in their iceberg. And water is collecting in these cracks. And when this water freezes in the winter, it will expand and break the iceberg. And if this should happen, especially in the winter, many young and old penguins will die. So Fred got worried and knew he had to do something. But he was in no position to make any pronouncements or dictate how others should act. Then he thinks to himself, what can I do? He decides to talk to Alice, a senior penguin and a member of the leadership council, who's very practical and no nonsense, and always gives good advice about the danger. But before Alice and Fred go forward, they decide to do a little experiment, where they put water in a bottle, seal it, and leave it inside the iceberg. If their theory is correct, the water will freeze, expand, and the bottle would have broken. And unfortunately, that was what happened. And they realized that their nightmare could come true. Then Alice led Fred to the leadership council to tell them about his discovery. But some of the penguins panicked. Others were skeptical, some even wanted to keep it a secret after listening to Fred. However, when they do realize that this could be a dangerous situation, they finally decided that they need to do something. And so they pulled together a guiding team, where the guiding team comprised of Louise, who is the head of the leadership council, Alice, Fred, Buddy, and a professor, and they had to come together to think of a solution. So while most of them were respectable and practical, there was one member called Nono, who was supposed to be responsible for weather forecasts, and was also accustomed to being blamed for being wrong. But Nono didn't see the need for something to be done, and was skeptical about the operation. But that's the only time the team realized that things could change, and they need another perspective. So, they went forward to see the cracks and the melting ice with Fred. And while they were devastated and wondering what to do, they saw a seagull flying. And the penguins think to themselves, "The seagull looks lost. But it doesn't seem afraid. Is it that moving from one place to another is the way it lives?" And that's when they developed a vision of finding a new strategy to live. The leaders needed to communicate this to the entire community. So they called an assembly, but Lewis asked Buddy to speak to the assembly about the problem, since he was loved by the people. Unfortunately, not everyone understood the problem at that time, so the leadership found innovative ways to communicate for most of them to appreciate the need for change. Most of the penguins then had a better understanding of what is at stake, and agreed to help as scouts to search for a new and safer iceberg for the colony. The team continued to empower others to act, encourage the scouts to keep pressing forward, and not give up. And a perfect iceberg was found, and they moved to the new home. Their new home was different. The best fishing grounds were in unfamiliar places, but the problems were not as large as the anxious birds had feared. There were many times that there were setbacks, and people were trying to get in their way or disturb the system. But somehow, everybody was convinced that work needs to be done. So they created a new culture, which was nomadic. And every season they looked for new icebergs. But the preparation was not as dramatic as looking for the first one.
Thank you very much, Eugene. Before you take over, I just wanted to give a summary for those who joined late. So it was Fred, who is a penguin, who recognized the change. He was not a leader, but he recognized the change. And then he identified Alice, the leader who he could speak to. So Fred identified a very important stakeholder who also took it to the council, another set of stakeholders, and they recognized that they also had to take it to the larger community. And you realize that the community reacted differently. So they had to listen to what the other penguins had to say before they could embark on that change. You realize that they also looked around, what were other animals doing? That's when they met the seagull, and the seagull was flying around. He didn't seem to be afraid. They looked for what other organizations, so to say, were doing in their surroundings. They also had to experiment where they put the water in the bottle, it froze, and then it expanded. So they did an experiment to be sure that the problem that they had identified or the change that they needed to make was real. Yeah, so basically that's the summary of the video that we just saw. So Eugene will take over and take us to the double diamond to explain how it works and how the change actually happened. Thank you, Eugene.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Abby. And so I will be taking you from this side onwards. For many of us, or for the first timer, the first thing that comes to mind is, so what is design thinking? Design thinking is basically a human-centered approach. We focus on the needs of the people. We use the technology available or the possibilities of technology available, and we focus on making sure that whatever we do, it contributes towards creating meaningful solutions that can guarantee business success or be desirable by the humans or by the people we are trying to solve the problem for, in very simple terms, okay? There are many frameworks, there are many design thinking frameworks, but one of the best and often used is the double diamond model. As you can see on the screen, basically we start from the point of the challenge. We move through phases of discovery where we gather as much information as possible, communicating with the people who are affected. Then we get to a point that we are able to define the problem around the context of who is affected, what exactly is the need, and what are the reasons or the insights. Sometimes we like to say the empathetic insight behind those needs, okay? It's not just saying this person has need for a new shelter. What could be the main reason behind it? And if we look at the story of the penguin, we realized their very existence was at stake. And that was the one empathetic insight behind the problem. So with an understanding of the problem, we are in a position to develop possible or potential solutions that will go through the stages of testing it. Then we are able to understand what works well. Then we can deliver the solution for an outcome. And we saw this clearly demonstrated in the penguin story. Now, to really succeed in design thinking, you need to have some kind of mindset, okay? You need to focus on people, human-centeredness. You must have empathy, the ability to put yourself in the shoes of others. You also need to understand that it is not a straightforward thing. It requires a lot of iteration. You get through it, you realize we're missing out on something. You have an opportunity to go back and understand it better and continue. And then design thinking is design doing, basically. We have a bias towards action. We understand, we define, and we get to work. Design thinking requires a lot of collaboration. You can't do it alone. And we saw it from the penguin story. And in design thinking, you must have a tolerance for ambiguity. You will not always know the answer, but the important thing is being able to understand and ask the right question. And with this kind of mindset, I think we are in a good place to talk about the design thinking tools we want to recommend for this particular session. In this session, we recommend to you the persona map, the empathy map, the journey map, and then for ideation, we recommend analogy as we saw from the penguin story or storyboarding. Okay, so now let's go through the steps of design thinking. Very quickly, I refer back to you to the double diamond. From the discovery stage is when we empathize and understand. The define stage is when we actually define the problem, develop its ideation and prototyping and testing, and then eventually we deliver the outcome. So let's go through step one, which is empathizing. In organizations, when the organization is confronted with change, whether it is abrupt or gradual, the key thing is understanding exactly what we are facing or we have confronting us. So you see questions that come up such as, what do we know about this problem? And these are questions that leaders must bring up. If you are leading the change, you must lead in the communication. In the case of the penguins, it was Fred, an ordinary member of the colony, who brought it up. Sometimes you may not be in the leadership position, you might be a team member, and you would have noticed the change from the marketplace. You need to bring it up in a way that get people to ask questions, not prescribing solutions for them, because you are still very much in the problem space. So what do we know about it? How well do we understand it? What do we see? What do we hear? How do we feel about it? Most importantly, trying to find meaning. What does it mean for the organization, its people, and its future? Okay, and the design thinking tool you can use to systematically and in a structured way guide this conversation is the empathy map. As a leader or a team member, you can actually pick the empathy map and flesh it out in a simple sheet or even on the board or even on the wall and try and capture what people say about what is going on, what people think about what is going on. And a classic example is ChatGPT. Okay, you can actually pull out a whole sheet and start capturing from people in the office place what they think, what they say, what they feel, and what they do with ChatGPT. And the very important thing as you do so is beginning to pick out the things that stand out. What are those points of low confidence or medium confidence? Basically trying to find meaning with it. The next tool I'm going to introduce you to is what we call the journey map. So still following on the same analogy or the same parallel lines with the penguin story, having understood the problem through the empathy map, we need to now map out the journey. Okay, now mapping out the journey, questions that come up. What will change about the way we work? What will change about the way our customers reach us and we reach them? What will change about the way we create value? What new knowledge and skills do we need to have? How are others surviving on this journey? We saw that happen in the penguin story when they saw the seagull. In our own present situation, these are questions we can ask concerning even how people are using ChatGPT or how people are even getting ready for the new world of AI-driven workplace, okay? Now, I would like to show you how your very typical journey map will look like. You take a good look at the screen and you see the journey map has different components. Number one, it has a persona. In our case, the persona could be the staff at the workplace, okay? Number two, it captures the feelings, the positive and the negative feelings. So you look at this example of Paula. Paula is going through a journey, and Dr. Abi earlier on mentioned that change revolves around people's journeys. So it's always important to understand that. Paula is going through a journey. Initially, she feels very, very negative about what is going on. You can see a concern. If it doesn't get easier to deal with this company, I may consider other options. This is what happens in organizations when change comes on the screen. People have different reactions and emotions to it. People have different reactions and emotions towards it. And if leaders don't take care of it, you can have people checking out like Paula of the organization totally failed. But I won't leave the company. Just think about what happens when people feel very disgruntled, but still want to stay on in the company. The company obviously loses. I'm going to hand back to Dr. Abi to take us to the next part of our presentation.
Thank you, Eugene. So the question you may ask, how do I get clarity of the problem? How do I get everything included? When you actually have the chance to get hold of the book, I encourage you to read it. It's a very simple book, and you realize that Fred didn't understand what was happening. He was trying to get clarity, so he went to Alice and said, "This is what I think is happening. I think the iceberg is melting." And Alice was like, "Yes, I agree, but..." So together they started defining the problem. What the video didn't show was that they actually took a journey under the iceberg to go and check what was actually happening. And by the time they came back, they went with another group of penguins, and they realized that what Fred was saying was actually true. So they took their time to get the feedback from other stakeholders. What insights did they also have, like Dr. Nono, even though it's not everybody who believed in him, they still got his contribution. So you need to clarify the problem with everybody, and then you get everybody included to say, this is what I think, and yes, I agree. And then you can create the point of view, asking that from what you have heard from everybody, what is actually the problem? What is the change that needs to happen? And after they had consulted the leaders, they had spoken to the community, they realized that the problem is that we knew it wasn't safe to stay here anymore, but then we were afraid of the change. The next thing that you need to do is that you create how might we statements. How might we create that change, follow that change, stay in the change? What can we do about the change? So for the penguins, it was how can we stay safe and still survive? After you've been able to come up with a POV, a point of view, what actually the problem is and what needs to be solved, or the change that needs to happen, and you have come up with your how might we questions, it is good to get the team together and start the ideation process, brainstorming, analogies, mind mapping. And we bold the analogies because we want to refer you back to the seagull. The seagull was just flying, and they realized that, okay, this bird doesn't actually stay at one place, even though we are used to staying at one place. Bringing it back to our world, we work in organizations, institutions, and sometimes we just look at the industry that we work in. But it would be good to ask ourselves, what are other industries doing that we can also do? Maybe not similar, but what can we use to compare and do? So you generate a multitude of ideas. And after that, we encourage you to create prototypes. So in the story, you realize that the penguins created two prototypes, one in the middle, where Fred and Alice put the water in the bottle, it froze, and then it broke. When you read the book, you realize, or even at the end of the story, it says that they made their first move. After everything that happened, they made that change. And that wasn't the only change that they made, but you realize that they kept on moving. But because they had done the first change together, the subsequent changes to their habitat wasn't as difficult as the first one. And we see that as a prototype. So they did the first prototype, okay, they were fine, but they felt it could be better. So they kept on moving and moving and moving. Papa, back to you, please.
right, thank you very much. So in design thinking, after you've got into the stage of developing your prototype, the next thing to do is to test, iterate, and refine. We like to say this: if you have to fail, it's better to fail fast and fail forward. Okay, so how do you fail fast and fail forward? Develop your prototype, test it. Does it work? Let me give you an example. Let's say you are leading a team, you notice that sales have dropped massively, you've gone through all the phases, you've come up with different ideas. Seriously, if you just go straight ahead to get budget approval and execute without testing, you increase your risk of even bigger failure. You are in a better position to try it small, try the solution that you selected, see how it works. Go back to the customers that have stopped buying from you and test it with them. Get their feedback, incorporate it into the idea you came up with or the prototype you developed to make it better. Then you can go back and deliver. And it's all about testing it with your users. Let me emphasize, your users, getting feedback from them. And that is where the iterative mindset comes. You don't get to a point that you say, I am done. You get to a point that you say, indeed, my users have given me feedback and they love this solution. They feel part of this solution. So we can go ahead. And that takes you through the refining stage. Okay. So what I'm going to try to do is to just bring up the double diamond model. I've overlaid a few commentary on it, and we are going to use the penguin story to help you capture it better. So in this image, you see the double diamond, you see the problem space labeled and the solution space. In the problem space, our task is basically around understanding the problem, empathizing with the people involved, and then defining the problem. So the penguin leaders try to understand the problem. They ask the critical questions, the right questions. What was the penguin community talking about? And we saw it from the video. And they defined the problem that, look, the iceberg was melting, but then the community is also afraid to move. So there's clearly the user involved, there's clearly the need involved. What was the insight? They realized if they don't do something about it, a time will come, they may not exist. Okay, then they went into ideation after they saw the seagull, which is the analogy. Then they created several options and eventually they tested the first migration. It was successful and the subsequent ones were easy. This is the basic framework we want to share with you as you go back into your organization. You might be in charge of a team. You might be in charge of a department. You might be in charge of a massive organization. The change could be gradual or abrupt. When it comes up, how do you go about it? This design thinking model, the double diamond, offers you very basic, simple steps that you can use and get the team involved to help you navigate the path of change. We have some very interesting examples for you here. So you see in this image, Casapreco, Ethiopia, Ethiopian Airways. During the COVID time, something very interesting happened. Humans were not moving. What will Ethiopian Airlines do? How might we still find a way to use our airplanes? They converted some of their airplanes into cargo planes because at that period, what was moving, it was cargo, vaccine, food, and all supplies that needed to move to people wherever they are. We look at Casapreco. Casapreco is in the alcoholic business. During COVID, what happened? We found them using the same thing they have to serve a completely different industry, which is the health sector. The same alcohol were now being used for sanitizers. This is how you embrace change when we say, see change as an opportunity. And that's our basic message to you. Okay, so with this basic understanding, I go back to the statement I love: design thinking is design doing. We're going to go into breakout rooms, and the instruction is very simple. When you go into your breakout room, one of you should volunteer your company or your organization and a change that you've noticed is occurring, and your team should use the design thinking step to come up with action, that very simple actions that you can use to manage and lead the transformation process. Just in case you want to recapture the design thinking model, I show it here for you. you can take a good look at it, and then we'll be getting ready for our breakout room. So I don't know if Matt has the breakout rooms ready. We will go
Yes,
in there.
I'm here. I would quickly
Okay.
put that
Okay.
on there.
All right.
Yeah, so I just opened up the breakout rooms. Everybody can just join one of the breakout rooms and take it from there.
Yeah, I think everybody's back.
Yes,
Okay, all right.
everybody's back.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. So just to help get you settled, we really understand that in going into the breakout room and then asking you to quickly run through the whole process, you might be wondering, how do we finish all of this in this record time? Yes, our goal was to help let you get a feel of some of the conversations or discussions that could happen at each of the various stages of the design thinking process. The key thing is you appreciating and getting interest and deciding that, look, I want to learn much more about design thinking. So I went through some of the rooms and I could see you trying to go through all the various steps. That was really interesting and great. We'll use the first 5 to 10 minutes to take feedback from each of the rooms. What did you discuss? What did you pick? What was your takeaway from there? And then we will give our final, and then we'll take some questions from you. We still have about it's 7 o'clock. We have about some 30 minutes to go. So 10 minutes for the room to share. We take some Q&A and then we give our final feedback. So which room would like to go first? I think there were 3 rooms. How many rooms were there?
4.
Okay, so we can go with room 1. Anybody from room 1 willing to share very quickly?
I'm not sure which room we were in.
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we group 1. Okay, Marietta, go ahead.
Oh, if you want, anybody can go.
No, we already discussed this.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ayatu from Sierra Leone. So we learned so much from our group, what we're doing. I think my own business was having some challenge that needs to rethink and refine. So we use it as a way to just discuss and find help here. My team agreed that we can discuss about it. So for us, we come to understand the problem that was happening in our community with my business. The girls don't have challenge or the worried or the mental distress. They have to find what they can use during their flow, and the options that are available within, like the other disposable pads, they're too expensive or they cannot even access them. And so for us to remove off that worried of what they can use or how they can be okay during their menstruation, so we thought that we can have a product to help them. And so we develop the products, we give it to them for testing, and from the feedback, we refine everything again and goes to markets. But target markets was how we can have organization, because we don't want to put the pressure on them since they're girls in the rural community. We don't want to put the pressure on them to just do anything to have money to buy the product. We therefore wrote letters to organizations we know they support menstrual hygiene programs and few other individuals and parents to be buying this product. But as it is, we're rethinking to refine this one so that how our users can be able to afford the products for themselves, be it in kind or cash. So in that refining phase, like we talk and we just think like this is the best platform to share how we can refine this if we still maintain the target markets, which are the organizations that support menstrual hygiene programs and few individuals that can afford, also try to encourage or find a way how the girls, they can pay in kind or cash. So as we're thinking and this program was here, we just thought that we can share it.
All right, thank you very much, Mariatu. Room 2, what did you guys talk about and what was the key takeaway?
All right. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Philip.
and I was in group 2. I think it was room 2. I think it was. I hope I'm not wrong. But let me quickly share what we discussed. So the problem we identified is one where an institution, a construction firm, right, is experiencing a downturn in terms of their revenues, and then also their employees are churning or they are resigning, obviously because their numbers are down. So we looked at the empathize phase. We first identified the stakeholders there. So we grouped them into their clients, management, and then staff level employees. The kind of things that we found that they are talking about or they are concerned about are, well, for management, they are worried about the revenue and the impact it's having on the business. And then for employees, they are concerned about where their next paycheck is coming from. And then finally, they have job insecurity. So they are discussing job opportunities and, helping each other out. Okay, good. And then in terms of defining the problem, so with all that we know now, we have an institution that has a disconnect between stakeholders because there isn't collaboration between management and the staff level. We also have an institution that has lost focus from its core mandate because it's originally a construction firm, but they've doubled in so many other things. And those are what's leading the institution to where it's going now. And then they are unable to salvage the downturn. So the problem can be defined, high level in this way. If we had more time, we could have made it a single sentence or so. But yeah, identifying these as the clear problems. Now we go into ideation. Now, in ideation, we proposed and defined like a 3-step or a 3-arm solution. Staff their best to facilitate the communication, training, and then finally a strategy touch point. So here we are bringing those at the top leadership together to refocus, like just take a look at the vision, the mission, and understand how far they've fallen and find steps to, come back. So that's what we ideated. Okay. In terms of prototyping this, yeah. So it's actually the prototype. The prototype is that 3-step solution. So we've defined them, sent out invitations for the debbers, the training, etc. And so now we have to test it. So we hold one staff debbar, we get the feedback from it and see the change in the institution as the test. Then in terms of the training session, we also hold one, and then we see the feedback and monitor the change. And then we also have a strategy session or a touch point, just one, with the top management. And then we observe the change in the institution over a period of 2 or 3 weeks. And with that, we'll be able to identify what works the most, and then we hunker down on that as our solution. So in a nutshell, that's what we discussed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Yes. So very quickly for group 3.
Daniel, maybe you can share. So I was moved from room 4 to room 3, and I met Daniel. We had a very short time when we were to discuss something. Daniel, do you care to share?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, so my company is into aggregation and sales of cashew nuts. We aggregate at the farm gate and sell to big companies that have warehouses in the district. So during the COVID, they couldn't come down. So it's affected the aggregation and marketing, because when you aggregate, the Ghanaians, to say, they don't have much money. So we depend on the Indians and some Chinese and Vietnamese. So they couldn't come down. So it affected the aggregation and marketing. So when we resumed from the COVID, I decided to introduce digital aggregation and trading. Like I wanted to put on a platform the various warehouses in the Wenchi Municipal and around Brun region where cashew is being cultivated. So I try to introduce that so that wherever these buyers are, they can just locate me, do business with me online. Then I'll deliver to them, whether they are in the capital city or outside Ghana. They wouldn't have to come down to Bruno. That's what I try to do. But Derry asked me whether I use design thinking. I told him no. I just when the market was interrupted, I just thought of introducing something to reach the buyers. So he took me through the design thinking process. I told him if I'm going to do something different in future, I'll frame questionnaire. Then he told me in design thinking, we don't frame questionnaire like a research something, but you do interview them, and also it's open and they can tell you stories. You try to understand them, you can observe and those things. So that's what we discuss at group 3. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Interesting. We can take room 4 and then we can have some questions from you. Room 4.
Mr. Adam, would you want to go, or Selassie? Any of you? Yeah, I think.
Okay. So room 4, we discussed a product, a luxury fabric bag, recyclable recyclable. Prior to COVID, it had very good business. COVID, everything came to a standstill. Post-COVID, it's struggling to go back to what it was before. So the team discussed various options, really good options, and I think the customer empathy, forgive me if I don't get the terms right, customer empathy was one big thing about going back to our clients who bought these products, ask them what they liked about the products, what could be done differently in terms of price points, usage, to just keep asking why, ask more questions. We also talked about our clients' segments, expatriates, locals, and in terms of the expatriates, now that they are not buying that much, the other idea was, how about you export to them, but then the cost of exporting is probably even more expensive than the bag. So why don't you look for someone else who is already exporting and partner them? So those are some of the various options we talked about. I don't know if there's any other vital part that I've left out, Kofi.
No, spot on. We didn't get through to the end, but yeah, spot on.
Yeah, wonderful. It's really interesting hearing the work that you did in your individual rooms. And just like I said when we started for this part, that the whole thing is to get you familiarized with the framework to pick your interest in learning more about design thinking. We will take some questions. If you have any questions you would like to bring up, please feel free, bring it up, and then we will be more than happy to answer them.
I do have a question. I think it's on the bigger design thinking, the whole concept. If a business wanted to learn more or probably be supported in the process, how does one reach you? What does one do?
Yeah, Dr. B, would you like to take that, or I should go ahead?
Go ahead and take it. I'll jump in.
Okay, all right. So just as we said, if any organization wants to learn or use the design thinking, there are a few ways about it. One is, very often it starts with the leadership. Leadership understand that situations are much complex now, problems are much complex, so they decide that we need to really have a human-centered approach to the way we solve problems. That is the beginning of the conversation. And then probably next step will be to find out who in the resource space can really help us as a team understand the process, the framework, and how to go about it. So you have, you can fall on any of the design thinking resource person. And the first step will always be to sit down with the organization, understand exactly what they are trying to solve, and then the discussion picks up from there. So that is always I always say the leadership drive it and the organization picks it up. Sometimes it comes down to individuals who within the organization who may know about it. The other facilitators here, I can see Kofi, Derry, Prof. So maybe if anyone wants to add on to the answer, that would be great.
I think, Selassie, I don't know, was your question was if you wanted help using the design thinking framework? Was that your question?
Yes, that was a question. Needed help.
Okay, so you want somebody to support you with the design thinking process for your business?
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So, Matthew, who is here, Matthew, probably you take Selassie's details after, and then Matthew is in charge of those things, and then you reach out to him, and then he can arrange to get you the help from some of the facilitators here.
Yes, Celestia, I believe you received my email about the that contained the Zoom link. I have my personal email there as well as that of design thinking.
I'll
So
check
you
it out.
can,
Thank you.
yeah, you can just reach out to me and then we'll take it right from there. Thank you.
Yes, so there is a question in the chat which has to do with, can we use questionnaire for design thinking? We need to understand what we want to try and achieve when we are using the process. We want to get deep insight from the users, from the people involved in the problem. And if you really want to dig down to the problem, you need rich stories, you need people to open up, and that cannot be solved with simple questionnaires. You need to sit and have deep conversations with those people. If you are around when we showed the penguin story, which we use basically to help understand, you see that there was a lot of conversation going on in the colony about what is going on and how it was going to affect them. Same thing applies. It comes down to communication. Questionnaires cannot get for you what you really want to know to help you solve the problem. So it is strongly recommended that you have conversation, deep, in-depth interviews, observation, sometimes even shadowing the people you want to help to really understand their way of life, how they go about it, their journey, and all of that.
Yeah, thank you, Papa. I just wanted to add to what you have said. And I always remember this example that Dr. Gordon uses. And Dr. Gordon will say, if you use a questionnaire, you ask your respondents, what did you have for breakfast? And the answer will be simple. I had cocoa, I had tea, I had coffee. But if you actually change the question into how do you fulfill your nutritional needs in the morning, you actually get a conversation going because it's broader. But if you just say what did you have for breakfast, it limits the answer that they give you. It's just a yes or a no. So I just wanted to give that example to help you understand why we don't encourage questionnaires in design thinking. Thank you.
All right, we still have room for more questions. So,
hello.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, so this is Daniel. Please, my question is the design thinking. Like we are working on transitioning to the TVET, I mean the universities, because the courses we run, we use traditional curriculum. So my question is, can we introduce design thinking as a course in the curriculum as we try to transition to technical and vocational way of teaching instead of the traditional?
Absolutely. Design thinking has become the go-to course in all over the world, from business school to medical school, whichever sector you look at. Now there's a concerted effort to get teams and people to understand the way humans go about solving their problems, which is basically use the design thinking methodology in solving problems. Okay, so yes, you can do that. It could be an enrichment program, or you could go for accreditation for your institution to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions, please?
Yes, a quick one. I wanted to find out, so with the module for design thinking, is it rigid, or do we have exclusive cases where the module is tweaked to suit certain situations or unique circumstances?
I'm not sure I if you could just take the question again. I missed the last part.
So my question is, I'm wondering if this module is universal, or there are certain situations where the module is tweaked to suit certain circumstances.
Oh, okay. All right. There are several design thinking frameworks that we could use. Number two, when you take the design thinking approach, it is user-centered. It is focused on you, the organization. So the process and the principle is basically the same, but depending on your organization, we adapt it to serve your need. I hope it answers your question. Basically, we move through the process of understanding, empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, and testing and delivering. That's the basic structure, but the things, the activities or tasks involved is all centered on the organization that we work with.
Sophie has his hand.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly comment on that question, Michael. So as Papa, you had mentioned, it's a lot around the user. So it's very user-centered, as well as from the very beginning, you can think about design thinking as a set of tools, right? So we hand you the toolkit, and then you can take any of the tools in the box to do a particular activity very well. So just as every tool in a workshop have a very specific use, usually you can also be creative about them and use them to achieve different tasks using just making sure that you're being safe and all of that. So back to the point, yeah, design thinking delivers to you a set of toolkits that you can use all of the individual frameworks in there to achieve very specific things. So yes, you can absolutely bend it to what you need to achieve as far as you are being guided by the mindset, as well as, inculcating the process of design thinking into your activity. So you can use it.
Thank you.
It's always a very interesting conversation whenever we have the Design Thinking Monthly Meetup. In today's session, we've talked about how we can use design thinking methods to drive change. And the key takeaway that we want to just share with everyone, with you, is just a minute. The key takeaway that we want to share with you is that, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
The key takeaway we want to share with you is, number one, we need to see change as an opportunity to improve and get better, rather than seeing it as a destructive force that can disrupt our life. Number two, we need to understand the human-centered approach when we are leading change. We emphasize that very often change revolves around people's journeys, whichever way you see it. So you need to focus on people as you drive the change. We also would like to emphasize the power in collaboration. And this is to say you can't do it alone, whether you are the team leader or you are a member of the team who has identified change happening. You need to bring in others. Bringing in others requires communication and the willingness to engage. You must engage. Design thinking offers you tools to go through this process in a very structured way. We shared with you some tools, the empathy map, which helps you to capture what and how people feel. We shared with you the journey map, which helps you to map out people's experiences and understand where they are frustrated or where they are excited about what is going on. And then we shared with you the other tool, which is the point of view, being able to get a team to identify who is really affected, what exactly is the problem, what is the insight behind that problem, okay? And then in the design thinking process, you understand that you start from first understanding what is going on, empathizing with the people, defining the problem, ideating potential solutions, prototyping them, testing and iterating and refining, then eventually you go on to deliver. So this has been this month's design thinking session on leading change in organizations using design thinking methods. We invite you to join us every month as we take on new topics, and we also invite you to take a deep interest in design thinking. Your facilitators for today have been myself, Eugene. I think I can turn on my camera because, yeah, have been myself, Eugene Elweke, and yes,
Dr. Abi.
All right.
And thank you all for joining.
Over to you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much, Dr. Abi and then Papa you. It's always interesting how can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's always interesting how day by day I get to find out how we can apply design thinking in various ways. And I think that Papa Eugene and Dr. Abi have done a good job introducing us to the few tools that we can apply when it comes to the change process. They talked about the persona mapping, gen mapping, and the other ones. And what really stood out for me was the story they started with the story about the penguin. And I think we can relate this story to our daily experiences as individuals and in the context of our organizations or wherever we find ourselves working. And I think that all we have to do is to continue to apply these methods and by thinking creatively and then being the driving force that will bring about positive transformations and whatever change we want to see in our lives as individuals and at our workplaces. And one thing I want us all to remember is that change starts with us as individuals, and with the help of design thinking, the methods and all that, we can have that power to create the better world and then come up with products and innovations that will transform the world. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I hope you continue to apply design thinking in everything we do. Just a quick announcement. So I'll make available the recording for this meetup probably by close of day tomorrow on YouTube, so that if you have to refer back and then get more insights about the processes they talked about or the tools they mentioned, you can get that. And our next meetup is going to be on June 29th, and we are going to look at using design thinking as a tool to optimize practices in innovations in agriculture. So once the details are ready, we'll make it available and we'll employ you to join us next month as well. Thank you all, and then have a good evening.
Thank you.